my YouTube channel. I hope you are all blessed. So as you can see by the title today, I wanted to do a video on my first experience in church and some of the things that I feel like are good to look out for, especially when you are new to the faith, and kind of my experience with that. I'm not going to be like naming the church or the people or anything like that, because it's not to slander any churches in particular or to necessarily expose. It's just more to kind of tell my experience and what I found. So if you are interested in hearing more, keep listening. Yeah, so I wanted to talk a bit more about my experience today. So I finally got around to doing this video. So as I said in my my first sort of testimony, because I'm going to do a full testimony soon at some point, but as I said in my first testimony, like I've never really been to a church before in my life, apart from maybe in like a school trip or something like that. I grew up in an atheist family. I wasn't brought up around like the faith or church or anything like that. So all of this is like completely new to me. And if you're somebody else that's also in that same position, it can be a bit nerve-wracking and overwhelming. Sometimes it's just the devil trying to stop us from doing things, and sometimes it's just nerve-wracking just because it's a new environment, you're not used to it, you don't really know what to expect. And the people that took me to my first church were absolutely lovely. I've been to 2 churches and I'm currently not part of a church at the moment. But if that's what I'm supposed to be in, then I'm praying to God to find me something that I'm supposed to be, if that's what I'm supposed to be doing. So I've definitely prayed on that, but I'm not currently part of like a church or anything like that. My first experience, I just felt like sorry, my window's open so it's quite loud. I just felt like there were a few things there that I weren't sure about. And I sometimes feel, and I've mentioned this in videos before, like sometimes when you're new in the faith, I feel like people like don't take you as seriously, or people think like your discernment or opinion is not as important, or people don't take it on as much just because you're new in the faith. And I personally don't agree with that. Just because I feel like just because you're new in the faith doesn't mean that your spirit isn't telling you something, doesn't mean that God isn't speaking to you, doesn't mean that you don't have some type of discernment. Obviously some people have more of a gift than others, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't discern things. And yes, of course, people that have been in the faith for longer and reading the word for longer can be extremely useful, because they are often obviously a lot more knowledgeable. But at the same time, you could be in the faith 20 years and still be deceived, you know. So yeah, it's nothing against the people. The people there were absolutely lovely. I really actually enjoyed the social side of things, but obviously that's not the main reason I'm going to church. The main reason I'm going there obviously is to glorify Yeshua and also to learn more about the gospel, etc. So a few things that I wasn't sure about that I got second opinions on, and also some things that I feel like are really important to look out for. The first time I went to church, I was proper nervous, I'm not gonna lie, because I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know, like, you know, some places you can go and you're always gonna get it to some degree where you feel like judged. Obviously I've got like a lot of ink and I've got like a lot of new age stuff on my tattoos as well, so I was thinking like, am I gonna get judged for that? Am I gonna get judged for wearing certain things? You know, there's all these things going through your head. And obviously when you're around people that are true in the faith and people that are really following that, they don't judge you in that way. And obviously God says come as we are, but obviously we know a lot of people that don't follow that. Of course none of us are perfect, we all probably judge at times. But yeah, I was really nervous about that. But don't let it put you off, because like I said, that's often other people's problem and not yours, because we know that the Bible said come as you are. So I just found that really nerve-wracking, and it was just a very different environment. Like, I'm quite a reserved person. I'm not somebody that's like going to be shouting and screaming, throwing up my hands everywhere, and I don't think you have to be. I just think it depends on you as a person. Like, you can worship in a way that works for you, but I'm just quite naturally a reserved person in those kind of scenarios. Like, I'm not going to be like all out there like some people may be. And like I said, there's not like a wrong or right way. It's whatever really works for you, in my opinion. But yeah, I'm just very reserved, so these situations can be a bit strange for me because I'm not really used to being around that. So it can be very nerve-wracking, but obviously don't let that put you off. The first time I went to church, one of the churches that I went to, there were a few things that concern me that I think are important to look out for, and I just felt like in my spirit there was just something that wasn't right. Like, the first thing is the way like tithe is done, because I think, don't get me wrong, like of course it's good to give, and I think tithe is a good thing, but I think it's the way it's done that can be the problem. And I found like the first church that I went to, for me, it was a bit too showy, because there was like a stage at the front, because it was a bit of a bigger type church, and people were like called to like all line up, and then someone like with envelopes of their money, and then someone come around and took the envelope, but it's like in front of everyone on the stage. And I personally didn't like that, just because I did feel it was a bit showy, and I just felt like it might make other people feel uncomfortable that can't or don't want to give in that way. Yeah, I just found that a bit strange, because when I've been to another church, like, it wasn't done at all like that, you know. So that I didn't really like. The other thing that's probably by far the most important thing is the gospel being preached. Now, I didn't feel like in the first church that I went to that the gospel was really being preached. I felt like it was a lot more bigging up man. Like there was times where the pastors and the deans were kind of like all walk through to music and all in a line, and I just felt like it was very showy and very like praising man, and I didn't feel like the gospel was really preached at all. There were like little bits of it, but I didn't feel like it was. And one of the pastors, who I think owned it, or I don't know, whatever, when he was preaching, like pretty much the whole time he was talking about himself, finances, and I don't know, I felt like a lot of it was very money orientated. So there was like a course that was like flashing up about the millionaires course, and I don't know, like I'm not going there to like, yeah, of course I love hearing people's testimonies, but when the whole preaching is not including the gospel and it's not about Yeshua, that's not really what I'm there for. And I just didn't really like that. I felt like it was a lot more showy, and there were just a few things when someone was prophesizing where I noticed that they lied when they were prophesizing. Like I heard them say something and then change it, and it just a couple of things that they were saying that I didn't at all agree with. And I just think that you've got to be really careful in the message that's being preached. I think that's one really good thing to look out for. Like, are they actually praising Jesus? Or is it praising man? What type of message are they preaching? Obviously, some of the most important things, which a lot of lukewarm sort of new age Christianity churches don't do today, is preach about hell, teach enough about the enemy's tricks, talk about sexual immorality, talk about sinning, repenting. There's not enough churches doing that right now. There's a lot of places that are accepting lifestyles and things that they shouldn't be accepting, when we fully well know people aren't going to be saved because of that. So it's very, very dangerous, and this is why it's so important you go somewhere that teaches sound doctrine. But yeah, that was my main concern out of the whole thing was the gospel not being preached enough. And it doesn't matter if you're a new Christian or you've been in the faith however many years, like regardless, that needs to be preached when you go to church, and you're always learning new things, obviously, when it comes to the Bible, because there's so much to it. And I just felt, and I also felt at the time like I couldn't express my opinion on it to other people, and I felt really awkward because, one, like, it doesn't matter if you decide that, even if a church just isn't for you, like, it's not a cult, so nobody should fall out of you just because you don't want to go to that church. I'm not saying anyone did that to me, but it sometimes can make you feel a little bit like that. And I felt a little bit like, because I was new, like some people weren't taking on what people were saying because they felt like they were newer in the faith and like, what do you know type thing. And I really don't like that type of attitude, because like I said, it's not a competition, but you know, and it's not putting that on other people, because obviously everybody's on a different journey, and I always pray that if people are in dodgy places, that they see that and they come out of that. Yeah, I just felt like my first experience, and I think when you're new, it's so easy to get wrapped up into things that aren't sound doctrine, because obviously we're not as educated in the word as some other people, and even when you've been in it a while and you're fairly educated, you can still get caught up in stuff like the devil's clever. So yeah, there was just a lot of things when it comes to like politics and money and all this kind of stuff. Like I'm the type of person that will go do reading around people as well, just because it is very important who you're listening to. And I read a lot of dodgy stuff about the people, and again, I don't repeat that because you don't know what's gossip and what isn't, but when things start to sort of add up, you start to think, on my spirit, this don't feel right. I kind of stopped going to that church. So, and obviously I did join another one for a bit, but again, I do think that I need to find a new church that's for me. I mean, everyone's got different beliefs on the fact of whether you need to go to church or not, so I'm not going to comment too much on that, because I've heard both sides of the story, and I kind of understand both, but I'm just going to pray, and whatever God's will is, I will go with that. But yeah, I think there are just a few things to look out for, because I think there's so many lukewarm churches now that aren't talking about this stuff, especially if you've got young people there. It's so important to preach about sin and to preach about hell, and you know, to talk about the devil's tricks, because if you don't know them, how are you going to avoid them? That's the problem. And it talks about exposing the devil's tricks in the Bible. You've just got to be very, very careful with it and pray on it a lot, because like I said, I'd rather listen to what God is telling me over anyone. So I mean, of course, sometimes God sends us people to tell us things as well, but always pray over it as much as you can if you're supposed to be in that place. And yeah, I just didn't feel like I was, so I kind of stepped away from that a little bit. But yeah, I'm a massive fan of like doing fellowship and stuff like that, so I'm really trying to get involved in a lot of that at the moment, to do Bible study with other people, because obviously it's really, really important to properly study this stuff, and I love studying anyway. But yeah, so they're just kind of some of my experiences, and I feel like it can sometimes be a little bit disheartening if you have been to a place where you have felt judged or rebuked in the wrong way, or when you've been judged out of frustration or judged for the wrong things, and it can kind of put you off. But don't let that put you off the faith as a whole. It's the same thing when I said there's a difference between religious people and people that have a relationship. Like I've always said, I'm not for religion, and again, this isn't to judge anyone else, but I'm against religion. I don't believe in religion as a concept. I think it's Luciferian, and I've said this in my other video when I spoke about religion over relationship, and I've always said, like, don't let some people that have that religious type view, or people that are judgy or whatever, put you off, because you know, we're not all going to agree on the scripture all the time anyway, which is fine, because a lot of it isn't a salvation issue, so it doesn't really matter. We can have different opinions on things and, you know, agree to disagree, but just don't, if you've had a bad experience, don't let that put you off. Don't let certain stories of how things are put you off, because I've always said I fully 100% believe that God's end time army is going to be full of people that have sinned a lot, been through drug addiction, like done a lot of bad stuff, you know, and I truly believe this is who he's using. And especially when you read the Bible and you look at who he's used and what these people have done and how God's been able to use those for his will, like anybody can be used. And I really feel like the end time church is going to be full of people that have been through a lot, so we shouldn't feel judged by people, because there are a lot of people I find that have sort of not, maybe, I mean, everyone sins obviously, but have not really done certain things or lived certain lifestyles or been brought up in a Christian type family. And like, it can be very difficult when you're very alien to it and you're just coming into it and it's all very new to you. But don't let those views, or if you meet people like that, put you off, because that just shows that they've still got work to do within themselves. And a lot of people will not take the sword out their own eye before they try to take it out of others, and we can all be guilty of that sometimes. But I feel like so many people are spending so much time looking at what other people are doing wrong, they're not actually working on themselves and their own relationship with God and what they need to change to have more of that identity within Christ. So yeah, don't let that put you off, because there definitely have been experiences that I've heard of from other people as well, where they've really been condemned or they've been to dodgy places. And, you know, like Satan, it will do anything to take you away from the truth and get you following what you should be following. So don't ever let him win. But yeah, I hope you found that video interesting. I'm going to be definitely talking about my experience with tent revival soon as well, because I really enjoyed that. Again, it was a bit of a new anxious type experience for me, but I really enjoyed it. I'm trying to push myself a little bit more with these things. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that video, and I hope to see you guys in my next one.